Hi, Roxy Keller here again, continuing to bake my way through the Great British Baking Show challenges, and it's Bread Week, so it's week 3 of season 5 from 2017, and the first challenge is the signature challenge, and the bakers are challenged to make tea cakes. These are a yeasted dough product that is often called fruity buns. So I'm going to make a recipe called Cornish saffron buns. These are tea cakes with some kind of dried fruit, and the original recipe used currants because it is from one of my favorite podcasters. There's a podcast called Home Baking, and the podcaster is a British woman who started her podcast during the COVID lockdown, and she's done probably 90 different podcasts at this point, and I just love listening to her podcast. One of the very first ones, I think it was the third or the fourth one, was focused on these different kinds of tea cakes, and she made a couple of different ones and talked about them that week. And one of them was the Cornish saffron buns. I started listening probably a year ago, and then I stopped listening for a while, and I've just recently started again because I love it. And it was why I actually bought saffron, and I have not used it since I bought it. I finally had the opportunity to use the saffron in these Cornish buns. For my fruit, I'm going to use dried cranberries, and there's also a little bit of orange zest in these. Then on the Great British Baking Show, they are allowed to serve the tea cakes with some sort of a fruit preserve or a whipped cream of some sort. I'm going to make a chai whipped cream cheese. It should be delicious. So let's get started. Okay, so the recipe will make 10 of these tea cakes, and I think they're supposed to be about that size. It calls for 2 pinches of saffron to be ground up in a mortar and pestle. This is the saffron, and in her podcast, she went with 2 pinches, and she said it didn't need any more than that. So that's what I'm gonna do. 2 pinches. 1, 2. 2 pinches of saffron. I hope it comes out of here because that's not very much. So after I grind that, if you have a spice grinder, of course, that would be a great thing to use. But if you don't have a spice grinder, this works great. Let's see if it'll come out of here. Add that to 100 milliliters. Fortunately, I have a measuring cup that has both cups and milliliters. So 100 milliliters is a little bit less than half a cup. And it says to add it to warm, not hot water. One of the best tools when you are working with breads is one of these instant read thermometers, because you can read the temperature of your water that you mix with your yeast so that you have the right temperature to activate the yeast. And it's great for making sure your bread is done and to the right temperature. Okay, so now I set this saffron and milk to the side and start making the dough. The dough starts with 500 grams of what she calls strong flour. That just means bread flour in the United States. This has 12.7% protein, which is a very strong flour. She also says to add the sugar and the yeast and the milk and then let it sit. But I actually think I'm going to prove my yeast first. I decided to transfer the flour to the bowl of my stand mixer. Um, she kneaded it by hand, but doesn't need too much kneading. But I'm just going to use the stand mixer for that with the dough hook. Now to bloom the yeast, I have about a half a cup of water at 105 degrees, which is great for yeast. And I'm going to bloom that for about 5 minutes before putting it with the flour mixture. I'm going to add just a little bit of sugar too. I use Red Star Platinum yeast. I've always had good luck with it. So I'm going to let that bloom for about 5 minutes. Okay, so the yeast is very active. It's very foamy. I'll add that to my flour. She called for 8 grams of yeast, and these little packets are only 7 grams, but I'm sure it'll be fine. I need 50 grams of softened butter. I used salted butter, and 50 grams is a little less than half a stick. 60 grams of sugar. And she calls for 225 milliliters of warm whole milk. So I don't have whole milk, I only have 2%, and part of that 250 is the water I used to activate the yeast. So hopefully minor changes won't make too big a difference, but I'm adding the saffron mixture, and time to stir. Now, not all bread dough type recipes have this step, but she calls for a 30-minute autolyse step. It just means to sit and let the flour absorb the moisture, and it's supposed to make a much better yeasted product. So I'm going to let that sit for 30 minutes, then we'll start doing some kneading. Okay, so it's been 30 minutes. Now it's time to knead. And again, she just did the kneading by hand, but since I have this, I'm going to use it. This is the dough hook, and I'll probably let that go for about 5 minutes. Okay, so now it's time to add in my mix-ins. So I will do that on the countertop. So I'll knead a bit of bread flour. So the recipe says to add 5 grams of salt, and I don't have a scale that will measure that very precisely. And I did use salted butter, so I'm just going to add 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Next, I need 50 grams of candied orange peel, and I actually made my own several weeks back. I bought a large bunch of Satsuma oranges, which is supposed to be one of the thinner skinned oranges, so it makes a really nice candied peel and a really nice marmalade. It doesn't say to chop it up, but I'm going to chop it up a little bit. Now, the host of the podcast, she made this with currants. Not even sure if we can get currants around here, so I'm going to use cranberries. First, I'll put in the orange peel. And one of the challenges on the baking show is to evenly distribute the fruit throughout the bun. So hopefully some kneading will make that happen. That's 100 grams of dried cranberries. I, like some of the bakers, don't like to have those really on the outside of the buns, but I don't think it can be avoided. Okay, now that needs to sit in a covered, warm location until it doubles in size. And my kitchen is about 68 degrees. It's winter, and it's about 13 degrees outside. So 68 inside is pretty nice and warm. But the bread will rise better and more quickly if it's around 75 to 80 degrees. I know they sell some proofing ovens, and there are lots of ways you can prove this, even putting it in the oven. Kate, the host of the podcast, talks about how to do that. I actually, being a botanist, I do grow a lot of plants from seed, and those little seeds like to germinate around 72 to 75 degrees. So I have heat mats that I put underneath the seed trays, and I can set the temperature. I believe I have it set for 77 degrees Fahrenheit. There's a temperature probe, and so I like to place my bowl with the bread dough on this, and that helps it proof and rise a little more quickly. It is kind of difficult to tell if it's doubled in size, but it's really important that it does proof at least that much. So I'm going to put it in this large bowl. I'm going to spray this a little bit with some baking spray. Avocado oil is what I use. Put this in there, cover it with a damp towel, and it'll probably take 45 minutes to an hour. I'll usually take a photo of it. This is how it looks right now. I'll usually take a picture, and then when I think it's doubled in size, I'll let you know. Okay, it's been about an hour, and I would definitely say it's been doubled in size. And you also want to be able to put your finger in it, and it comes back very, very slowly. That means that it's proved. And now I need to split it into 10 equal weight balls for the buns. So how much does this weigh? I don't know how much this bowl weighs, so I'll have to dump it out first. Set that to 0. 1140 grams. I don't even have to do that math, right? That's 114 grams for each bun. I haven't made a lot of bread in my life, but some of the people that I've watched will say not to pull your bread apart, that you should cut it with a bench scraper. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to make 10 different buns. Okay, so each one of these little piles is about 114 or 114 grams. So now I want to grab a little bit more flour, and to make them nice rolls, there's a couple of ways you can do it. Again, I want to try and get the fruit, the cranberries, to be on the inside. And some people will use this motion. These have to rise again anyway, so it's okay if I build up more gluten here. But I'm going to try to get them all into little balls about like that. Another way to do it is to pull from the outside in until you get approximately that shape, and then again form the ball like this. Okay, so these are the 10 tea cakes shaped, and now they need to rise again. The instructions just say until fluffy, but I want to definitely see an increase in the size. Then they will get an egg wash, and then I'll put them in the oven. I'm going to go ahead and preheat the oven. The instructions say 410 degrees. So I'm going to put this back on my heat mat and let them rise. I'm going to cover them very loosely with a bit of plastic cling wrap, and that way they can rise without being hampered by a towel. So those have about 10 more minutes to rise. I'm going to do a total of 30 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and make my whipped cream cheese. So I need 8 ounces of room temperature cream cheese. A little while back, I made my own mix of chai spices, and I got the recipe from playswellwithbutter.com. And it's a homemade chai spice mix with 6 ingredients: 3 tablespoons of ground cinnamon, 1 tablespoon of ground cardamom, 1 tablespoon of ground ginger, half a tablespoon each of ground allspice, cloves, and nutmeg. Before I add the chai mix, I'm going to blend this cream cheese a little bit just to get it a little bit creamy. 1 tablespoon of chai spice mix and 1 tablespoon of honey. Ooh, that smells good. I'm going to taste it just to make sure it tastes good. I think it could be a little fluffier, and one recipe I found said to add some milk to fluff it up a bit to make it more creamy, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to start with a quarter cup of milk. That was probably a little too much. Adding another 8 ounces of cream cheese. I think it has enough chai spice, but I am going to add some more honey. That's just my preference. I like a little bit sweeter, so I'm going to add 2 more tablespoons. It's time for the buns to go in the oven, and they've puffed up a bit. They will rise more in the oven during the oven spring, which is right at the beginning of the bake when the temperature is rising. When the temperature gets to about 140 degrees of these, the yeast will die, so they will work like crazy until that point. So that's the oven spring. So these are supposed to go in for 15 minutes. But first I need to add the egg wash. I've already made the egg wash, which is 1 egg yolk, and it says a splash of water. So I whisk that together. This is supposed to give the buns a nice brown color and a nice shine or glaze. Okay, going in the oven for 15 minutes. That tastes much better now. So I'm going to put this in a bowl and put it in the refrigerator. Okay, so 15 minutes seemed to be just the right amount of time. I used my instant read thermometer to measure the temperature, and yeah, some of them I expected it to be about at 190 degrees when it's done, and these are above 190 and up to 200, so I think they're done. I'll serve these with the chai whipped cream cheese that I made, and hopefully they'll be delicious. I'll let you know. The next episode is the technical challenge, and for this technical challenge they have asked the bakers to make a classical cottage loaf. So I think that's another British thing. It's a big round dough and a small dough on top of it, and I have seen what it's supposed to look like, so, and I have the recipe, so that will be my challenge, to make this cottage loaf. So that's it for this week, and if you are enjoying my videos, please share them on your social media and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and please leave comments or questions if you would like to talk to me. I love suggestions if you have those as well. Thank you.